First of all, Mike, thank you very much for inviting us to come here. This is a very, very, very exciting opportunity for not only Metra as a whole, but a little bit of my own personal feelings. I want to recognize Tom Broderick. Tom worked for me and many, many years ago, and we worked on the Pickens Cane account. I want to give a shout out here to Jim Monroe. Jim and I met in 1979. His father, the legendary Mike Monroe Sr., hired Anderson as the auditors, and we have had a 21-year relationship with Anderson, and also I've continued to work with Pickens Cane post-retirement. And Tom is the reason we are here, and I just really want to recognize that. Mike mentioned Arthur Anderson. Our motto at Arthur Anderson was think straight and talk straight, and I hope we're going to do that right now. The slide on the screen is A2. The fire is set to thaw out the switches, and which was the historical way that you thawed out switches. But believe it or not, A2 has been on television from Europe to Asia, reporting that Metra sets its tracks on fire. My objective today is to create a fire at each of you to launch a project that could potentially bring the greatest return on investment to any Metra project. Each day, over 350 Metra and Amtrak trains cross this rail intersection. It is the throat to three major maintenance facilities. The congestion limits Metra's ability to serve the region, and additional storage and maintenance capacity is needed. So there are probably going to be three prongs to this project: the station, A2, and storage facilities. The combined Metra and Union Pacific lines through Fulton Market are a major artery of Metra. More precisely, it is the aorta of Metra. The major issue is this: Tower A2, the Western Avenue crossing, is Metra's busiest and most congested crossing. It's aged and it needs replacement. The project and replacement of A2 leads to the ability to build a Fulton Market station. The solution is a flyover, a station in the Fulton Market District, and the enhanced capacity for storage and maintenance of railroad cars and locomotives. Governor Pritzker called for the big investment in our transportation network, including transit and bridges. Well, this is a big project, Governor, and maybe we can get on your list to do that. So everyone asked me, and I'm going to give you hopefully a straight answer to this question. Everyone asked me, is this Metra's number one project? Standing here today, Metra's number one project is to get warming facilities on every one of our platforms, particularly in view of the polar vortex. Most of those stations are in the city of Chicago that do not have warming shelters. So that is our immediate short-term focus. And the big question is how much money are we going to get out of the capital bill? We have not had a capital infusion in 10 years, to give you the size of the problem. This creates deferred maintenance, obviously, and deferred investment. Number two is replacing some of our passenger cars. Would you believe we have passenger cars that are eligible for Medicare? We do. That's unheard of in the railroad industry. We have the oldest fleet in the country. To a certain extent, we run a museum every day out there, and we want to change that. Those two items are deferred maintenance. So how does this become number one on the capital list, the expansion list, the improvement list? The answer is funding. So there is the bottom line, and hopefully the straight answer to the question we keep asking. Personally, I'm very much in favor of this becoming our number one project. I look forward that we are able to work this together. This is A2, July 23rd, 1932. That's a Milwaukee Warren suburban train heading into Union Station. A few weeks ago, you folks celebrated your 100th anniversary. We want to congratulate you on that. But Metra's predecessors and Metra have been your neighbor for the entire length of your organization. What is now the Union Pacific commenced operations as the first railroad in Chicago in December 1848. What became, or what today is the Norfolk Southern serving the Cargill facility, that railroad's predecessor arrived in about 1868. We don't have the exact date recorded. The Milwaukee Road, our predecessor for the services to Fox Lake and Elgin, arrived in 1872. The point of this is not to talk about the history, but how long railroad assets are in service. The project that we are talking about, we need to think about the next 100 years, because the life of the bridges is over 100 years. The Western Avenue Bridge was built in 1905. It needs replacement. Of the 843 bridges in the Metra system, just under 500, the main spans were built in 1918 or earlier. The bridges we are replacing in Ravenswood were installed in 1896 and 1897, to give you some perspective of how long these assets think. So my encouragement to all of us here today is, let's think like Daniel Burnham. We need to think big. We need to think long-term. And my objective, hopefully through these remarks, is to stir your blood and create the action that is necessary to bring this project to completion. As I've talked about, the major issue is funding. So let's talk a little bit, and we'll go through this quickly. Here's the overview of what we would like to talk about. If we could move to the next slide. This is Ogden Avenue looking west in the 1930s. The diesel locomotive on the far side is one of the first diesel locomotives of the Northwestern Railroad. It is switching all of the industries between Kinsey and Fulton. That photo was taken at May Street. It had a different name at the time this photo was taken. We are in the largest terminal in the country, in North America, and you can probably go a lot of other places and say that. We have 1,300 to 1,400 trains a day in this area, of which 687 are revenue service Metra trains, plus another 50 of deadhead moves to reposition the equipment. Now please notice the two such trains over on the far left of the photo. There's about 6 or 8 trains in that line waiting to get into the California Avenue maintenance facility. Sometimes if things are off schedule, those trains are sitting there an hour and we lose the ability to get them in and out for maintenance. That's why we need a flyover. Jim's going to talk about some other reasons why we need a flyover that also can be exciting. So you can see the statistics here. You can look at all of this, but of the 242 stations, 79 of them are in Chicago. Most people don't realize that. Chicago is extremely important to us as the origination of passengers and determination of passengers, as well as bringing people of the region into Chicago. Believe it or not, the service territory that we serve is equivalent to the combined square miles of Rhode Island and Delaware. That's a statistic that most people marvel at. So that's what we serve. We serve Delaware and Rhode Island. Another example of the 288 passenger trips, in some cases people are making 2 trips a day. Think about this. Those of you that have a definition of the size of Naperville, we move Naperville into the city and we move Naperville back out of the city each day. Running trains is the easiest thing we do. We have medical emergencies, we have police activity, we have accidents that interfere, we have fires that interfere, we have all of the issues of a municipality in providing the daily service to the people. There is, at the end of this presentation, there is a appendix where we have the statistics and definition of each one of our 11 lines. Here's our downtown terminals. We have about 110,000 people going in and out of Union Station. About. Our activity in Union Station way exceeds Amtrak's activity in Union Station. And you can see the other statistics of what the number of people that are going in and out. So there are 25 passenger trips through these various stations, or 34 or 84,000, depending on what you see. But you notice that OTC, Ogilvy Transportation Center, and Union Station, trains come through this area. Okay, capital crisis, we talked about this. You can read some of the things, but our capital needs are overwhelming because they've been deferred. To give you some perspective, in the 35 years of Metra service, the gross amount of grants that we have received is somewhere in the vicinity of $10 billion. The RTA says that our state of good repair requirements are $12 billion. So we need to chip away at that. What we are trying to avoid is what's happening in New York City, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. Deferred maintenance in the Washington, D.C. subway, which opened in 1976, have cost a few lives already because of fires in systems. In the system, the electrical distribution system. New Jersey Transit, frankly, is an utter mess as a result of some of the policies of the recent governor in not funding New Jersey Transit. The Long Island Railroad has been a story for decades. The New York subway system, just the subway system, has $42 billion in debt. Just think of the debt service on that. And their current president has said that they need $40 billion to bring the system up to par. So those are the numbers that are out there, and I share those numbers with you so you know what we're competing with on a federal basis. These are our principles, key principles, and what we need to do with our capital. This station meets, or this project meets every one of those principles. That's why it is so valuable to us. In a little while after Jim speaks, I'm going to talk about a public-private partnership. But to introduce that topic that will come later, decades ago, the legendary editor of Trains magazine, David P. Morgan, wrote, "Commuter trains are a public asset and a railroad liability." What happened nationally was the creation of Amtrak took the financial burden of intercity passenger trains off the backs of the railroads. In the 1970s, the 3R Act and the 4R Act of Congress took the financial burden of the East Coast commuter services off of then Conrail. Fast forward to 2 or 3 years later, the RTA starts to fund the operating losses of the commuter railroads here in Chicago that resulted in the creation of Metra in 1983, and Metra became active in 1984. So we will celebrate our 35th anniversary this year, sometime this year. The bottom line is that maintaining commuter operations or suburban operations, whichever you want to call it, in the railroad industry did not work. The railroad industry was in terrible financial condition leading up to the 60s and 70s. What we're finding today, that despite its best intentions, government does not have the ability to meet the funding needs of commuter railroads along with all of the other funding needs that it makes. And I have made this clear on a number of occasions. We also have a financial model that does not work anymore. It's not sustainable anymore for a number of reasons. That's a separate conversation. What we need to do to make this project go ahead is we need to put together a private-public partnership. And we need to figure out and convince the private sector that maybe they need to put a little bit more into this partnership than they have in the past in order to maintain the service and maintain the viability of the northeast region of Illinois. We also think that this project is very vital to the city of Chicago. So with that, I think I would like to turn it over to Jim and let him speak for a while. I think we have to switch microphones here, so hang on with us for a minute.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having Metra here today. I know the chairman's been excited about this for many years. My name's Jim Derwinski. I'm Metra's CEO and executive director. I've been with Metra for a little over 23 years. I actually started on the Chicago Northwestern, and I've been railroading now for 26 years. Prior to that, I did a stint in the military and then came back to Chicago from the south side of Chicago my entire growing up time. This project is very, very intriguing because it opens up opportunities. A lot of times I say, Norm had talked about it's a $12 billion state of good repair need. Well, if we work on that over the next 10 years and we replace our old bridges, old cars, old locomotives, historic kind of equipment that we run, that's going to get us back to where we were in about 1990. Unfortunately for Metra, we've gone through some rough times in the past decade, and I think we're at the point in time where growth is now back in our vocabulary. Since I've been a CEO for a year, we sit down all the time with our teams and we talk about what could you do if money weren't the object. Because if money's always the object, you can't dream. You only can do what we've been doing. I laughed when I heard Norm talk about in Washington, WMATA. They were built in '76, and they are in a bad way. Our oldest locomotives today in service are running from 1977. And we're not that far off, obviously in years, but we have a much better maintenance program. I guarantee you that. I've been out there in WMATA. This particular project holds so many different opportunities. We started talking, actually this started stimulating last year when we heard about a guy who was going to dig a tunnel from O'Hare in Chicago, and we said, wait a second, we have tracks there. We have tracks on the east side, we have tracks on the south side, Union Pacific has tracks on the west side. We already go there. We actually have 20 scheduled trains that go to O'Hare a day. It's not great service because of the fact that it's so limited. So we started talking about how not just this project, but the word growth's back in our vocabulary, and that we could be looking at express trains. So not just your 20 regular scheduled trains that make all the what we call milk run stops, but trains that are hot shots. Just leave downtown, next stop O'Hare. We know we can do 30 minutes. That's not even a problem. We probably can do a lot less. And once again, this is a component of a bigger picture because O'Hare is forecast to grow. The forecasts are 80% between 2025, 2045, and somebody has to move all those people. They say without us right now, 27 more lanes of inbound and outbound highway would have to be built. Well, with all those extra people coming to O'Hare, and you've taken that way, there's no room right now. So when you start adding an 80% growth in O'Hare, we are definitely already a component of the relief that's going to be needed out there. I don't know if the tunnel's going to get built. I do know the fact we're there already, and this opportunity exists here today. So what we're looking at is technology, maybe in a little even brighter light. Zero emissions type vehicles, stuff that would actually just be, once again, a hot shot from Central Business District right down to O'Hare and back. The bridge that Norm talked about where A2 sits, that's the underside of the bridge. We often talk about, well, why, what's a bridge? We have a lot of old bridges. Bridges aren't sexy projects, but what they do is they help open up communities. And just like out here on the west side, a wider span bridge takes out all of those pilings down in the center, which takes out the opportunity for trucks to hit it, which takes out really what ends up happening is when a truck hits a bridge, and this happens quite often because the bridge was built before automobiles were invented, the railroad has to shut down above it. And when it shuts down above it, we have to inspect it to make sure it's safe, and of course, whatever has to happen on the roadway. So all the bridges that even go along this corridor here, their replacement is only going to make this area even more vital, even though it's a root piece of infrastructure on the railroad. But what sits right above it is what Norm talked about, is those switches. It's called A2, where 3 tracks cross over 4 tracks. There's 41 operating switches on top of that bridge. They're air operated, because that's the way they built them back in the 1930s. They're heated by fire, because that's the way we did it back then. Actually, we used to put stuff out there and actually light it on fire. Now at least we have natural gas. We don't have to run people out there all the time. That bridge was built in 1905. And within about 5 years, who knows when, we have to make sure that that thing is part of our plan. So the way Norma described it is it affects 7 different lines. So you got the direct lines that go over the UP West, the Milwaukee West, the Milwaukee North, and the North Central service. But we also store there the Heritage Corridor equipment. And then the other 2 UP lines, all of their equipment has to get west of A2. So that's one thing in just our service area. But what it affects eventually is 55% of Metra's ridership on a daily basis. That bridge, for whatever reason, out of service at any given time will collapse everything north of I-88. There's no way all of those extra people are going to be able to be on those roads on a daily basis until such repairs take care of. That's why this is so critical to us, and like Norm says, this is our main artery, our aorta. So that's what it looks like when you're in the engineer's seat. You're on the, if you're on the left side there, you're on the Milwaukee tracks, and you're about to go over the Union Pacific tracks. Only one train at a time can go. That's the way crossings work. So that's why, like Norm was saying, all of those trains get backed up. And who's going to go first? Revenue. Revenue is always going to go first. That's we're on a time schedule. So as the trains head into the station and go to OTC and go to Union Station, there's only so many tracks. They have to start coming back out, and they have to go to the storage yards, which are on the other side of that interlocking. And so that's why everything starts stacking up. This costs us eventually more money because of the fact we can't get on the equipment to clean it, to take the engine off, to put the fuel in, and all the things that have to be done on a daily basis has to be condensed down to a very, very, very small window, i.e. you need a whole bunch more people there at that period of time to do all that work at once. As you go over that and you see the fact that there's a station right on the other side of that, Western Avenue, it makes it so that every single train going over that thing actually has to slow down to 20 miles an hour. Now with the station there, you're gonna have to slow down anyways if you're gonna drop people off or pick people up at the station and vice versa. But for the 4 Union Pacific tracks heading out, they wouldn't have to slow down. So this is an economic benefit, not just to make it safer, because no longer do you have to worry about derailments on switches, and you're just moving straight tracks. So the ideal situation is a flyover where basically back east, and I'll show you another picture, back east, we're gonna have one railroad go completely over the other railroad. That's the ideal plan. This is the Inglewood flyover. This is where the Rock Island train on top used to come down on those tracks right on the bottom where the Norfolk Southern and the Amtrak train is sitting. This is right after the flyover was completed. This is the inaugural picture, but that's what it used to look like. For an example of price here, that's $134 million for that bridge. And it also has to go over the Dan Ryan. And that's mostly what Metra owns. So now this project becomes much more complicated and obviously pricier. On top, there's two bays, 2 tracks. In this particular case, we'll show you what we were thinking here with this project because it opens up all these opportunities, including the station. So right here's the city pound. This would be needed most likely for storage of trains. That's the A2 right there, right under Western Avenue. And then that's the green line is the Milwaukee lines coming out of Union Station. They come out at grade, meaning they're on the ground. And the Union Pacific that comes out of OTC is already up in the air, meaning elevated. So the ideal situation is the green one crosses underneath the purple one. And then basically we talk about a land swap the rest of the way. And when we hit A2, they would go in their own respective directions. There'd be some crossover. So one would say, well, why can't we just plop a station right in the middle of the 2 of them and touch them? Well, the fact of the matter is, with the amount of throughput that we have coming off the Milwaukee, coming off the Union Pacific, 337 moves over that crossing every day, you can't stop a train. You physically can't stop one train because every single train is coming behind it, or there's trains coming out of those 2 stations back at it. So literally, as you rebuild this, and this is the greatest opportunity, flipping the tracks, building it wide enough so that in the center there's actually a depot, a place to actually park trains. Maybe this is a terminus then down the road. Thinking, once again, 100 years out, not just the next 10 or 5 years. Building that as an actual landmark within inside Chicago, a destination. We know for a fact, obviously, the Fulton market here is just growing, and we know transportation is a huge element to most businesses out there. Once again, that just kind of really shows exactly where it lands. We've had discussions. Does it sit next to Racine? Does it sit next to Ashland? The fact of the matter is, we're going to have to really look at this, because this is not land that we own right now. This is not public land. This is going to be a very impressive project when it's all done. But every time I drive around in the city and anywhere you go and you look at these flyovers, you know, the Jane Burns flyover, when you look at it, they're building bridges everywhere. We're building roadways to get things over. And these are great investments and they help reduce congestion. This is the exact same project, just on a grander scale, because we're going to move full-size trains over that. The idea would be that we'd have it be a huge transit center, obviously tying in with CTA Pace, the Ubers, Lyfts, and the cabs of the city, and making it obviously where you can walk to the CTA. We got the Green Line right down there. It's an incredible opportunity, we all believe, and we all believe that this is something that will have a great return on investment. Once again, it hits all of our key points. It hits safety and security. It makes our system safer to not have the crossovers. It reduces our operating footprint, and it also then should increase ridership by a good stretch. And tying that O'Hare piece into that, where we could have O'Hare service stop right at Fulton Market, or even start right from Fulton Market right to O'Hare, over the next 20 years as everything starts evolving. This is the type of thought process we all should be having here within the region, within the city, within the state. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Norm. He's going to take you through a little bit of the financials.
This is the economic impact from national studies of what would happen if we invested $1 billion. You can read it yourself, but it impacts employment and it impacts the economic benefits to the state and to the city. We talked about the public-private partnership. This is the key, and the amount of funding we can get into the partnership unlatches the opportunity to go ahead and do this. So I think that one of the first things we do is we really talk about how we form this partnership and what is the private contribution to the partnership. These are some of the next steps that are out there. I think that the committee really has a good start on this, and I think that what we really need to look at is where we head. Again, in summary, we have 2 deferred maintenance projects that we must attend to. That's warming shelters on the stations, especially in the city of Chicago, and the acquisition of new passenger cars to replace parts of our Medicare fleet, or all of our Medicare fleet.